United Nations General Assembly in New York, and he'd had a meeting with a lady named Marine Le Pen, and when he came back home, he was severely criticized for it. The fact is that her party, and the group of parties in France that she leads, came very close to getting the majority of seats in the recently contested French election. And the issue was, if that happened, if it went to full flowering, as some people may say, and her group, they call it the National Rally, as far as I remember, took hold of the French Parliament, we would have had to, the world would have had to deal with her. We have relations with the European Union, and France is part of that. The question is how we traverse this landscape that is so radically changing. Those things and the implications for us in Trinidad and Tobago and the rest of the Caribbean, we'll see how far we get to it. But Rodney, good to see you, and thanks for coming on.
Thank you very much, and it's a pleasure talking to you about an important topic, and a pleasure having this discussion and for your audience, so that we could share ideas as Trinidad seeks to maneuver itself in and gain from what is evolving in the international arena.
Yeah. So the issue is that this lady is said to be, in some cases, attacked and taken apart for the fact that she is among the emerging movements in different parts of the world that they call the far right, and they're not good for our understanding of how international relations must be and how global development should take place and cooperation and the rest of it. But the fact is, it is a kind of way of looking at the world. And I start from the point of view that we have good relations with what has been for decades now, the EU, the European Union. France is a critical part of that. I want to go back a bit to, you'd met with her, I think you shared with me, you'd had lunch while you were in that position, as they called in Trinidad and Tobago, the PRUN, the Permanent Representative to the United Nations General Assembly.
Yes, I met with her together with about 18 other ambassadors, including Camille Gonzalez, who is now the Minister of Finance in St. Vincent. He's the son of
the Prime
Minister Ralph Gonzalez.
Yes.
And our idea was that we saw an evolving Islamophobia, an evolving right-wing a situation happening globally. And I wanted to get a sense of who Le Pen was and what were her views on various issues. So it was not a case of going there to be influenced by her, but to get a sense of, so that I could report to Trinidad and Tobago about this new development. That was before Trump became president of the United States and initiating a right-wing movement. What we saw in Europe was the fact that migration was taking an important role in those societies. And as more and more migrants moved into Europe, you found that tensions began to develop between those who say put France first, for example, or put America first and ignore the rest of the world. So I wanted to speak to her, and I asked her some hard questions, and I found that I was surprised actually at the level of sophistication. For example, I asked her, why was she so against immigrants? And her response was, there is nothing wrong with immigration if it is controlled, if it is legal, and if it is done in the wider interest of the countries where the people live and the receiving countries. She made the point that there were more doctors from Benin, which is a Francophone African country. Yeah. There were more doctors from Benin in Paris than there were in the whole of Benin. And she said that was not right. It was necessary for France to adopt a policy where people would find it fruitful and necessary and important and convenient to live in their own countries. So I was shocked at the level of sophistication. It was not a case of we hate immigrants, we hate black people, get them out, overt racism. So and I realized then that the world was dealing with a sophisticated a philosophy that if we were not careful, we would run into difficulties. And this is all part of the changing global dynamics that Trinidad and Tobago has to be mindful of. So we cannot, the view could be taken that, okay, Le Pen is a right wing, do not speak to her. But it was Winston Churchill who said, famously said, that diplomacy is the art of telling a man to go to hell, and he asks for directions. In other words, you talk to everyone, you get their views, and you look at your country's interests, and you try to see how your country could evolve in that scenario.
Yeah, and her coalition, as it were, picked up, what, 37 seats in the last 20 elections. This now at 126 in a situation with 500 plus seats, and it is broken up among different groupings and different parties and so on. So, you know, that was the national rally, the so-called far right, is moving ahead, and we have to countenance the fact that they could...
One day, we will have Trinidad and Tobago and the Caribbean will have to confront a survival and optimizing our diplomatic posture in an environment where right-wingers could take control of the global discourse. Ms. Le Pen got 33% of the vote in the first round. The left-wing New Popular Front got 28%, and Macron's Ensemble got 21%. It was only because when they recognized the possibility that Le Pen could win, that they united the forces and they were able to stave off the threat that she presented to France. But let's face it, it is already a reality in Hungary. Hungary has a right-wing government. It is already a reality in Italy. Italy has a right-wing government. The United Kingdom, it is not exactly right wing, but the Conservatives, they were able to move away from Europe, Brexit, because of fears of immigrants and whatnot. And there's a rising anti-immigrant movement in the UK, in Finland, in Germany, and other European countries. And we have to be careful, because in the past, Europe, Canada, the United States were seen as safety valves for our overpopulation crisis. So you have a lot of Jamaicans living in England and in Canada and the United States. A lot of Trinidadians in Canada and the United States. So the Caribbean always saw Europe, Canada, and the United States as a safety valve for surplus population. But this may not be a reality now, as migration becomes an issue in the US elections due in November. And the United Kingdom already has put, they were sending back people to migrants, illegal migrants to Rwanda. I think the new government has put a halt on it. But we have to be careful about that scenario. One of the things we have to understand is that Trinidad and Tobago is our home. And if the option of migrating no longer exists, or no longer exists as it did in the past decades, then we have to make this place a paradise. And therefore, our decisions have to be taken mindful of the fact that Trinidad and Tobago citizens will have to deal with what we have here. And in addition, I am hearing quiet talks about our diaspora, that if Trump wins and if they advance a far-right agenda, that some of them are considering migrating back to Trinidad and Tobago.
You mean coming
so
back?
It is not a case of what happens in the world we leave alone and we ignore and we do not speak to them and we do not seek to influence. The alternative is frightening.
Yeah, so let's focus a little bit now on the last point, because that is a reality. Some of us, with our persuasion, we hope it doesn't happen, that rightism takes over in the United States, because that will hit home in a significant kind of way, because we're thinking that generations of relations worldwide, but the United States, North America, has been sort of our first port of call, so to speak, when we try to escape these realities
Correct.
in the Caribbean.
You know, the right-wing agenda, there's Project 2025.
Yes.
And one of the items on the agenda is revoking the right, what they call the birthright of citizenship in the United States. Right? And they're talking about a halt to immigration. Now, all of this is tied to a fear in the first world that they're being overrun by former people from the colonies.
By immigrants, yes.
And the whites in America. There's a sophisticated language they're using. But when you get down to what is the root cause of this thing is a fear that the white groups in the United States who consider it God's country and who consider this their inherent right, even though they stole it from the first citizens. Even though they stole it, they see it as their right. This is their heaven, this is their paradise. And it is not by accident that because when Obama became president, that the backlash was Trump, who is an exceedingly right-wing person. So all I'm saying is that we have to, in our foreign policy, to understand these developments. I think our ancestors, fellows like Lennox Bala and people like A.N.R. Robinson, they had a global vision. And they saw the need for a rules-based international order, where the rule of law will prevail on the international forum. So they created the ICC, for example, the International Criminal Court, that will criminalize crimes against humanity. Right? You have the ICJ that will negotiate in judicial ways the conflicts among states. Now, what we are also seeing on the international order is a decline of the rule-based order. The rules-based that was created by our ancestors. And we, the successors, have not been able to understand that and come up with a meaningful response to that evolving reality. Why do I say there's a breakdown of the rules-based international order? The ICC, the International Criminal Court of Justice, the ICJ, ruled that Netanyahu and whoever and Hamas leaders were guilty of crimes against humanity. And you know what? The major countries ignored it. Netanyahu said, I don't care. Right? We have issues, we have situations where the International Criminal Court has made rulings that have been ignored by the U.S. Congress and by the U.S. government. In fact, I was just reading where Starmer, there's the new Prime Minister of England, has decided to withdraw their criticisms of the ICJ. That was part of Sunak's approach to dealing with it. What they were saying, what Sunak was saying, and what the United States government is saying, is that the ICJ does not have authority to rule on issues, crises, and conflicts among states. Now, if that declines, what is our future in Trinidad and Tobago? If it is might is right and not the rule of law exists, if might is right, what is to stop a future Venezuelan government from taking over Trinidad and Tobago? What is they have already talked about taking over part of Essequibo in Venezuela, in Guyana.
Well, 2/3 of what is Guyana's territory now.
As a critical first principle in our foreign policy to reinforce the rules-based order that our ancestors actually developed. A.N.R. Robinson was instrumental in the formation of the International Criminal Court. Well, I don't think we give thought to those things. So we negotiate with Venezuela,
and in fact, what I would say is that when he began to talk about
government could create issues for us.
When he began to talk about it, and for significant periods of time after that, there were many of us in Trinidad and Tobago who thought that this was a pipe dream. That he was talking about the question of the International Criminal Court. When he was prosecuting it, mercilessly and trying to point out what the values of it were, You know,
correct.
I write in my book that we didn't think that made any sense and it was possible.
But there was always tension between multilateralism. That is where the institutions like the United Nations and the ICJ and the ICC would have a say. Yeah. And also where bilateralism, that's where nations operate in their own interests, unmindful of what the international community thinks.
Yeah, and I would tell you that
always that tension.
Yeah, I would tell you that I myself, sort of, I wasn't committed on the I would say the philosophy of the thing. I being a reporter in those days, but I write in my book that I went to the United States with him on one of these official missions, and when we got to New York, there was a reception, in a lady's apartment in sort of what they call the Upper East Side in New York City, and some of the people who came to that were eggheads, as we call them, university professors from different universities in Chicago and other parts of the United States, in that discussion, and they were talking to him, in admiration, because they were some of the people, their thinking was what he was doing was correct. And I said, well, if these kinds of people, and I was taken there, I was hanging out with a man named Wilfred Naimul, who'd been one of those diplomats among when you were talking about earlier, some of the people who had that vision. You had Frank Abdullah and J.R.P. Dumas and Nelson Gift and others. But Naimul was in that room and talking with some of those people. And I said, well, it struck me that this thing is kind of like a reality, this question of the International Criminal Court. And so here it is.
The reality is it could act as a brake on bilateralism. All right, so that if Trump wins, okay, he will have a significant reign as a superpower, a leader of a superpower. But there's a conscience, an international global conscience, represented by such institutions as the United Nations, the ICJ, the ICC, ITLAS, the International Tribunal for the Law of the Sea, which is another issue that will come up in future in terms of how we divide the resources of the oceans. It acts as a brake, and that is all that we could expect from the rules-based order. That Venezuela, if it thinks of taking over Trinidad, and just remember, there are documents in Venezuelan books which sees Trinidad as part of Venezuela. If a future Venezuelan government is minded to take over Trinidad, and we remember, we all have a large Venezuelan population in Trinidad, and it's growing. The pregnancy rates among the women are significant, and they're growing. And it is very possible that if something happens, a conflict between Venezuelans in Trinidad and our children in future, conflict, that the Venezuelan government may step in to protect their citizens in Trinidad in the same way that Turkey did in Cyprus when Turkish citizens Turkish Cypriots were threatened. So I agree to you that it will never replace rabid nationalism with people like Trump and people like others who are Le Pen, for example, who are nationalists. But what we have to do is create institutions that put a brake and give the world community an opportunity to balance their power.
Yeah, and we have to be really ready to deal with some of those things if and when they become reality. And from some angles, they are increasingly appearing that they would become reality. A different kind of philosophy will be, sort of the reality in some of these countries, whether they're in Europe or in parts of our region in Latin America and the Caribbean.
All right. A question that we should be addressing is the question of the BRICS, the rise of this new alternative to what some countries see as Western hegemony and imperialism. So you have countries like Russia, countries like China, countries like South Africa,
India,
and Turkey and others coming together to say, listen, we cannot operate in a world that is dominated by Europe and the United States and Canada. We need an alternative. Now, Trinidad and Tobago has to work out how do we navigate that tension between an evolving global order and the old order to maximize our benefits. For example, I always thought that we should have, in a sense, played off, it's not the best word. We should have used the tensions between China and the United States to our advantage. There's a way of threading the needle where we do not surrender our sovereignty, but we gain from this conflict, and we gain economically and whatnot. So that when we negotiate with China, for example, or the United States, this would be part of the background information and knowledge that would address our negotiations with the United States. It cannot be that the United States dictates to us. We must always have an option that China exists, we are negotiating with China, and you better come good. Because the alternative, and to do that, we cannot do that alone. We have to do this by leading a CARICOM consensus. And my fear is that whereas in the past, Trinidad and Tobago under Eric Williams and A.N.R. Robinson and others, some of the names you called, were leaders in CARICOM. Today, I think Trinidad and Tobago is a bystander. You know, we are not taken seriously. I think Mia Motley in Barbados, Irvan Ali in Guyana. I think Gonzalez in St. Vincent, Ralph Gonzalez in St. Vincent, and Jamaica. Jamaica is poised to take advantage of whatever happens, because Trinidad and Tobago has surrendered leadership. We have no position on anything, and we remain victims, hopeful that things will evolve in our interest.
It's interesting.
A decade ago, yeah. I saw Trinidad and Tobago foreign policy at the UN. It was not the best. I could tell you, we had an office that was run down. At that time, the property values were declining in the United States, but we had signed an agreement in Trinidad to increase the rent from $50,000 by 10% annually, because people in Trinidad, the decision makers in Trinidad, did not understand that property values were declining, and in a declining market, rent should drop or you buy property. So I bought a property for 12.8 million, is now worth 50 million US in one of the best parts of Manhattan. But I also saw that other countries were taking the leadership role in CARICOM. So at that time, you had John Ash he was the ambassador from Antigua and Bermuda, and he became the president of the General Assembly. And I asked, why is Trinidad and Tobago not in these critical posts? We never held it before. And they said, you can't change it now. It comes available every 10 years. So I put down immediately. I didn't even consult Port of Spain. I put out Trinidad and Tobago for the two critical posts at the United Nations. President of the General Assembly, which we have now, and in 2027, a non-permanent seat on the Security Council, which we would get, unless this government is changing, or the government in future changes its mind.
Well,
but the problem, the idea was to get us at the President of the General Assembly so that we could advance our interests. So that I am sad that we have the President of the General Assembly, who could use his position, for example, to get senior UN officials to help our foreign mission. For example, years ago, we had a fellow, Mr. Desmond Parker, and he was the foremost protocol officer in the world.
Well, yes,
and when he retired,
I see.
He should have been introduced to our foreign service so that we would develop a capability in protocol, etc.
Desmond Parker,
but tell me, so we allow it to fall apart.
Was he not a Trinidad and Tobago diplomat and foreign service officer when he was? In fact, I saw him in action as the chief of protocol and other things for the UN Secretary General. In 2012 or so, and I think he went after that. He's working somewhere in Africa
and the United Emirates. Why Trinidad? Why we have the President of the General Assembly? He cannot use his influence, and their tremendous influence, to advance our interests. But he must be told what are our interests. So I would have hoped that prior to him taking up the post, that our government would say, listen, these are the three things we want in this 1 year that you are there. We do not want you. There's a book called Oxford Handbook of International Diplomacy, which says it talks about club diplomacy and network diplomacy. I suspect we are practicing club diplomacy, sit down, attend meetings, drink wine and whatnot, which is what Trinidad and Tobago did in the past. But what we never did was network diplomacy. That's how do we use our position to interact with Saudi Arabia, to interact with China, to interact with the United States, to interact with Europe, EU, in order to maximize our benefit. My fear is that Jamaica is positioning itself to be a leader in the Caribbean. It is possible that the President of the United States could be of Jamaican descent. They have already had people like Colin Powell, etc., or with Jamaican background. So Jamaicans, when they go abroad, see the brand Jamaica and their role in the brand Jamaica, and they maximize Jamaica's interests. We have a diaspora, and I don't know if we have a diaspora policy that tells our diaspora, listen, you're in the United States. We want you to be the best nurse in Brooklyn. When you become a best nurse in Brooklyn and you learn their skills, come back to Trinidad, spend 3 years, impart your skills to the nurses in Trinidad so that we have thought out policy that advances our national
But to what extent it is or isn't a reality that one CARICOM a representative anywhere speaks for and on behalf of the rest of this sub-region?
That is the myth, but not the reality. I knew that, for example, John Ash, who was the ambassador from Antigua and Bermuda, when he was president of the General Assembly, all major jobs in the UN were given to, not given to, but it was maneuvered, so not all, most, many. In fact, I had discussions with him and I say it's unfair. Trinidad we used to have people in the security services because of there's a former gentleman who was head of security at the UN, and a system developed where we got to. But each country has a quota, and our quota was filled with low-level security person in the UN. Whereas he showed me a format with all the jobs, when they become due, and who you begin training somebody for that job, so that when the time comes, that person is most qualified. Singapore does it, France does it, China does it. We have to do it. We have to look at the jobs in the UN and say, look, that person is retired. For example, our friend you call Desmond Parker.
Yeah.
He is tops in diplomacy and whatnot. He was retired when Ban Ki-moon left. Okay, who do we have to replace him? Who are we lining up? Justice Lucky was a judge on the ITLOS, International Tribunal, the Law of the Sea. He told me that when he was retiring, he told Trinidad that Trinidad should think about a person and start mentoring and start preparing him to replace Justice Lucky.
All right, my friend.
And you know what? For the first time in our history, we have nobody as a judge in the International Tribunal for the Law of the Sea, because we have failed to pass on the baton.
Yeah, but we have a representative somehow in the whole international law of the sea business, Eden Charles, but we'll have to leave that for another time. We have to continue from there to continue to talk about where we are in this world that continues to evolve, whether it's in the interest, how we secure our interests as small states in the major arena. But thank you very much for being with us, Mr.
Thank you very much, sir.
Yeah. Well, that's our program for this edition of 10 Questions. I'm Andy Johnson. Rodney Charles was our guest. We see you next time. Thanks for watching.
WESN. Transform your home with PCU Plus. From stylish furniture to the latest appliances, we have everything you need to create your perfect space. At PCU Plus, we offer fair prices and affordable financing options that are cheaper than hire purchase agreements. With convenient locations in San Fernando, Tobago, Arima, and our lifestyle showroom in Barataria, you're never far from the best deals. Visit PCU Plus today and discover why we're the top choice for quality furniture and appliances. PCU Plus. Quality you trust, prices you'll love. Visit one of our locations or find us online to start transforming your home today.
The Eminent Caribbean Jurists Awards recognizes and celebrates the outstanding contributions by lawyers to Caribbean development. This year, the Academy proudly recognizes and pays tribute to 48 legal luminaries who represent 9 diverse jurisdictions across the Caribbean region. Their invaluable contributions are immortalized in a compelling book of essays, Legendary Caribbean Legal Practitioners, that succinctly chronicles their remarkable legacies.
Hello there and welcome to AM Prime on WESN Content Capital. Before we even start this repatriation and reintegration process that we've already failed, or are we doomed to fail?
You've got to invest in the institutions that you've established to carry out those sorts of core functions.
We now get into the regional updates to give you an understanding of what's happening across our neighboring islands.
We have available a number of films that are worth showing.
So it was day one when the French Revolution started to develop the concept of universal human rights.
What happened this time is unprecedented. It's one of the largest terrorist attacks in history.
Let's welcome Carl to the program. Carl is over there next to Steph. Hello, Carl.
Silky anteater or pygmy anteater, and we have 2 of the 3 species of anteaters right here.
Folks, we're back and better than ever.
Your show have always appeared to be a show that is focused on going to the cause or looking to the cause.
We hardly ever talk about the white-collar crime, though. We always talk about the ones that involve more as physical violence against individuals.
The citizens will only measure transmission when water starts to flow through their taps.
The Constitution doesn't talk about local election.
Contract mafia is responsible for looting the country, and they own and operate these politicians.
So if you are running a country and you can't say nothing as a prime minister, please take up your bag and go.
It is not comparative to the murder figures, but it is in fact very high.
I believe he's protecting certain individuals.
You are watching Strictly Legal on WESN Content Capital. Just give an overview of what exactly is that split arrangement.
It is, now you don't need to register nothing, you don't need, we can do that another time. But then it becomes a hit, and then everybody starts to want to claim.
The laws that predate many of the independent countries' constitutions are going to be those colonial laws.
We know there are an infinite amount of circumstances that would lead to a murder.
I have a
great idea and, I have a great concept. But until it's actually expressed, it does not become intellectual property.
Accomplishments or targets of a forensic accountant is to quantify what may have been lost.
We believe we defend criminals and we manipulated the law and we exploited the system.
A responsible journalist will reach out to the person who they have the information on for a comment.
This is Face of Sports, WESN Content Capital. How you felt about the kiss on the lip?
That's the business. I'm not to do with that.
I find that was distasteful. The national senior team, whether you like it or not, that is the model for all other teams to follow.
I'm assuming that the regional requirement may be a much stricter requirement.
This is not about Pro League and Super League. This is a league run by the Normalization Committee that I'm responsible for.
Nobody expected FIFA to fund this arrangement.
If we don't get a professional attitude towards this, we are doomed for failure.
You break the balance, trip the leg, control the body.
They ain't gonna stand put forever.
Why you want the Chiefs to lose so? Why you want the Chiefs to lose so?
They already have two. Lamar don't
Why?
have.
You're jealous because you know the Chiefs getting closer to the Patriots. Let's go to the last part.
No,
of the
not no.
Let's go to the last part.
No match for us. As some foreign friends put it, it would be like placing a big watermelon on a sesame seed.
The Chinese have spent years preparing for an invasion. They've built 4 times as many warships as the Americans. The Chinese Navy now boasts 370 vessels, compared with fewer than 300 for the US.
If Taiwan falls and is unable to respond, the Communist Party of China could become the leading power in the world and trigger the decline of US global influence.
In October 2022, the US President, Joe Biden, made a comment that surprised many observers.
Are you willing to get involved militarily to defend Taiwan if it comes to that?
Yes.
You are.
That's the commitment we made.
Biden's declaration raised the spectre of a Third World War and had some people preparing for the worst.
This is a military-grade mask for use in wars that involve nuclear, chemical and biological weapons.
These 40 civilians are training in the mountains of Taiwan. The organizers simulate chemical and nuclear attacks to test their resistance. This training is organized by a military official. The aim? To prepare the people for a modern, complex war.
Regardless of whether war happens today or not, my preparations assume that if it breaks out, I'll be ready. In Taiwan, more and more people like me are preparing for war.
Fear of nuclear war runs high in nearby Japan, for understandable reasons.
It was like an enormous crack of thunder. The window of my house suddenly bulged inward. Broke a great noise like bam, and broke into 1,000 pieces. Outside, the adults were moving around in a strange way, like zombies. They had come from the epicenter. They were injured and bleeding. Normally, blood is red, but they were all gray. The trees and flowers growing in front of our house all lost their color and became gray too. Atomic bombs remove all the color from the world. This is me. I was 4 years and 4 months old.
For decades, Masakazu Masukawa refused to talk about his experience. But he began speaking out a few years ago, concerned that the lessons of the tragedy would be forgotten. The 81-year-old is one of about 100,000 survivors of the atomic bombings on Japan who are still alive today.
Neither we nor our parents have experienced war. But today there is war between Russia and Ukraine. Right now, at this very moment.
As he was speaking, I imagined my own family dying. That thought alone is unbearable. Yet it happened to him.
Before the war in Ukraine, some students would sleep or talk while I told my story. They didn't really listen. But now they do. I can tell that it has affected them.
After the Second World War, people believed radiation sickness was contagious. The survivors were shunned and struggled to find marriage partners. They were treated like outcasts in a country that longed to move on from the bombings. Masukawa is visiting a US base in Japan for the first time. Although it has the self-defense forces, Japan, like other Asian democracies, relies on its security alliance with the US. Sasebo is a sprawling, strategically vital naval base in Japan. A public relations official shows us around.
This ship is massive.
Not compared to the main ship. That's even bigger.
This shipyard is home to 9 warships, almost 4,000 service personnel, and 1/3 of the US Navy's stock of missiles and munitions. In the event of a conflict over Taiwan or an attack from North Korea, the US response would come from here.
Nagasaki is where the bomb fell, right here. And now I hear worrying things about North Korea and their missile tests. I'm very worried.
In 2022 and 2023, North Korea test-fired a record number of missiles, most of them in the direction of Japan.
We can't ignore this threat and pretend we don't need the Americans. I worry Nagasaki will be hit again, not by an atomic bomb this time, but by a nuclear attack that leaves it in ruins. It will be a disaster.
Japan has more US bases on its soil than any other American ally.
日米同盟というのが極めて重要な要素になります。その他にも先ほど申し上げましたオーストラリア、
We treasure the alliance between Japan and the US.
そしてカナダ、インドなど
But we also organize joint drills with Australia, the UK, France, Canada, and India.
フランス陸軍と
We conducted a military drill with France and the US for the first time on Japanese territory.
実施いたしました。それは日本国内で
It's crucial to ensure peace, stability, and freedom in the Indo-Pacific region.
機会でした。自由で開かれたインド太平洋地域の平和と安定にとって極めて重要なことだと思います。
The Japanese government wants NATO, comprising the US and its European allies, to open a liaison office in Tokyo, leading to accusations by Beijing that Washington is trying to form an Asian NATO. We return to Taipei. Is war inevitable here? 1 hour from the capital, in the heart of Taiwan's Silicon Valley, we get a better idea of why the island is so important. This tech park is home to 610 companies with a combined turnover of 50 billion euros, as well as high-tech laboratories with dust-free environments. These engineers produce tiny, precious semiconductors. Without these chips, none of our consumer electronic products, computers, mobile phones, or even our cars would be able to function. Taiwan is by far the biggest manufacturer of chips, accounting for more than 60% of the global market.
Our government have a very good view to decide to develop IC technology in 1970. Because in this industry, Taiwan is short of the natural resources. So we decided to work on the IC industry technology. Mostly we are advanced than the company in mainland China.
Taiwan provides more than a third of the semiconductors used by Chinese industry and 90% of the most modern chips. If it attacked Taiwan, China would end up hurting its own economy.
The whole IC industry and the supply chain will be destroyed. Not only is it harmful in Taiwan, but it's very bad for the global condition, because actually mainland China is the largest demander for the IC chips. So I don't believe they want to do that.
For Taipei, the semiconductors are a form of insurance, acting as protection against an attack from China. And leaders in the chip industry are seen as guarantors of Taiwanese security.
This is the electrical bicycle, also contain the semiconductor inside. This actually is in the Volkswagen cars, contain our chip inside. And then this is from the Hyundai, same as your cameras. Your camera has a lot of silicon inside, Ukraine and the Russian war is more localized war. The impact's much smaller. But Taiwan semiconductor, semiconductor become the foundation of the world economy. So if semiconductor plant being destroyed, then that will be a disaster. So that's why the whole world economy will be set back by 20 years.
China, whose economic growth began slowing down last year, would have much to lose in a conflict with Taiwan. It would have to start manufacturing the latest semiconductors, as it would no longer be able to rely on the island it has invaded. The close relationship between Taiwan and China is not just economic. It extends to their history and culture, a factor some believe makes war unlikely.
Yeah, a little hurt.
Oh, I think I'm not doing that very great. So.
Like all other young Taiwanese men, Hao is about to begin his military service. The 20-year-old has Chinese ancestry, like 90% of Taiwanese people. He's proud of his roots and isn't afraid to show it. His new haircut means he can put on this traditional Manchu wig and take selfies.
My grandpa come from mainland China, from Beijing, from Shandong to Taiwan for about 80 years ago. Yeah, and I'm a Manchurian, and this is the Manchurian's traditional hairstyle. Yeah, I grew up here, so I love this place, but I also love mainland China.
Hao would even like Taiwan to be peacefully reunified with China, but if it comes to war, this soldier's loyalty to Taiwan is unshakable.
In the situation that they attack Taiwan first, I would think I would be very sad. But I think it's reasonable to fight against them.
小孩长大了，妈妈以你为荣啊。OK， 好，长大了。
OK， 妈妈。OK， 好，拜拜，各位平安，好不好？
We meet Hao again, this time with his parents, as he prepares to begin his military service.
好，你们回去吧，回去上班，回去上班。
上班了，应该两个上班了。好，
拜拜，拜拜，好，拜拜。
The recruits have assembled at Taipei's main railway station. On January the 1st, Taiwan's government extended mandatory military service from 4 months to 1 year, a reflection of current tensions.
I'm scared. If war starts, there are so many casualties.
I'm still excited for it because something is big just going to happen. I'm changing another environment to live my life.
If Donald Trump, who opposes the US's role as the world's policeman, is elected president again later this year, many fear America's commitment to the island's defense could vanish. And that could act as a green light to a Chinese invasion.
Hello and welcome back to the France 24 newsroom here in Paris. Our headlines this hour. Traffic slowly resumes after a massive attack targeting France's rail network. It came just hours ahead of the Olympics opening ceremony, with cancellations and delays impacting 800,000 travelers, including some Olympic athletes. Paris Mayor Anne Hidalgo says the sabotage will not impact tonight's ceremony. Speculation.
WESN. Here is your WESN News on the hour. I'm Naomi Macnish. Thanks for joining us. Here are the headlines. MP Keith Scotland appointed second minister in National Security Ministry. Minister calls for probe into videos involving minors. Tobago PH driver sentenced to 11 years in jail for raping teen. Now for the details. Port of Spain South MP Keith Scotland will become a cabinet minister responsible for policing to try to help Minister of National Security Fitzgerald Hines in the fight against crime. The Prime Minister told a post-cabinet briefing at Whitehall on July 25th. The move comes after constant calls by the opposition for Hines' head amid an ongoing criminal onslaught, including 15 people murdered in one weekend in July. Dr. Rowley said, "We have run this government since 2015 with a significantly reduced number of ministers. But because of the pressures of the pushback that is coming to us from the criminal element, we have decided to put a bit more of the cabinet resource on the police and some aspects of security." Reading out the entities falling under the ministry, he said the police were of concern to cabinet. Rowley said, "We believe the police need special care and attention, special monitoring, special review, and of course special guidance in some instances." The Prime Minister said he has advised President Christine Kangaloo to add a minister to the ministry, namely Scotland, to deal with police and government issues. He said Scotland would take over responsibility for policing, offender management, illegal immigrants, drug trafficking, drug enforcement, and money laundering. Scotland will be a cabinet member as minister in the ministry, Rowley added. Minister with the responsibility of Gender and Child Affairs, Ayanna Webster-Roy, has sent a request to the police asking them to look into 2 videos involving minors that are circulating on social media. The first video shows 2 young boys recording themselves engaging in sexual activity, and the other is of a TikToker alleging that a minor was involved in inappropriate activity with adult men. Some who viewed the video told the TikToker in the comments that the matter should be reported to the police. The minister said she had not seen the videos. Speaking at the handover of the Braille version of the National Strategic Action Plan at the Parliamentary Complex, St. Vincent Street, Port of Spain yesterday, Webster-Roy pleaded with those who did not consider it their legal responsibility to report abuse to consider the minor's future and asked for them to consider it as their moral and spiritual duty to do the right thing. She said if the information did not come to the minister, the police, or the Children's Authority, then they could not act. A 48-year-old private hire taxi driver from Tobago has been sentenced to 11.5 years in prison for raping a teenage passenger almost a decade ago. Ricardo Reynolds of Mason Hall was found guilty of the crime by a 9-member jury before High Court Judge Kathy Ann Waterman Lachu almost 2 weeks ago and was sentenced on Wednesday. Justice Waterman Lachu set the sentence after considering a mitigation plea from Reynolds' lawyer and a response from prosecutors Dylan Martin and Niara Budan. The judge deducted the 15 days Reynolds spent in prison after his bail was revoked upon his conviction. She ordered that he register as a sex offender within 7 days of his eventual release and report to the police every 3 months for 8 years. She also ordered that his name, photograph, and information on his conviction be posted on the public sex offender website. According to the evidence in the trial, the attack took place on November 19, 2012. The 17-year-old victim had just attended a Thanksgiving function at her aunt's home when she boarded his car at a taxi stand in Scarborough. Her boyfriend paid $40 to drop her home in Canby. While en route, the man asked the victim her name and asked her to have sex with him. She refused. The driver then diverted to a secluded beach in Lambo and dragged the teen out of the car and raped her. He then drove off and left her at the location. The victim made her way home and reported the incident to the police later that night. Well, that's your WESN News on the hour. I'm Naomi Macnish. Thanks for watching.
WESN.
Transform your home with PCU Plus. From stylish furniture to the latest appliances, we have everything you need to create your perfect space. At PCU Plus, we offer fair prices and affordable financing options that are cheaper than hire purchase agreements. With convenient locations in San Fernando, Tobago, Arima, and our lifestyle showroom in Barataria, you're never far from the best deals. Visit PCU Plus today and discover why we're the top choice for quality furniture and appliances. PCU Plus, quality you trust, prices you'll love. Visit one of our locations or find us online to start transforming your home today.
The Eminent Caribbean Jurists Awards recognizes and celebrates the outstanding contributions by lawyers to Caribbean development. This year, the Academy proudly recognizes and pays tribute to 48 legal luminaries represent 9 diverse jurisdictions across the Caribbean region. Their invaluable contributions are immortalized in a compelling book of essays, Legendary Caribbean Legal Practitioners, that succinctly chronicles their remarkable legacies.
or bad happens, you will hear about that in Russia. Otherwise, they are giving this a snub. Most Russians are, again, and I'll just leave you with this thought, the head of the Russian Sporting Olympic Committee actually maligned some of the athletes who are participating, saying that they are foreign agents. That's a designation Putin has given to anyone sort of basically who collaborates with outsiders or is seen as getting help from the outside. Foreign agent has become the new designation, public enemy #1.
Wow. Yeah, big global issues hanging over these games. Yeah. Doug, thank you so much for that. That's our international affairs commentator there, Douglas Herbert. Well, Paris Mayor Anne Hidalgo has said that the railway sabotage would have no impact on the opening ceremony. Forecast rain could put a damper on things, though. Visitors so far don't seem too put off. Jenny Shin has more on the final preparations underway along the Seine.
Are we going to be famous?
This couple from the Czech Republic is on a morning stroll along the Seine to get a glimpse of the venue of the opening ceremony.
We just wanted to check how it looks and to prepare for the evening, but anyway, we don't know. So that's it, what we know actually. So
you're so mysterious.
Yeah.
With just hours to go until the event, the grey weather was far from ideal on Friday morning. But it's not enough to dampen spirits. Many remain optimistic.
It's not going to rain. It'll be beautiful.
We think it's going to be an amazing show. It's a shame it's raining, but I think it's going to make it more romantic.
Organisers of the ceremony have been discussing a plan B. Heavy rain means certain details of the show could be modified. But at Pont de l'Alma, where the catering service is preparing full steam ahead, there will be no changes to the plan. They've been preparing the menu for months, handpicked by the chef.
We have to feed 1,500 people come 6 p.m. There's no room for mistakes. Everything is meticulously planned and structured.
As preparations near an end, the countdown for 7:30 p.m. Paris time continues, as France and the world wait to tune in for the start of the Paris 2024 Olympic Games.
Well, despite the less than ideal weather, festivities have already begun here in Paris. The Olympic flame has been making its final journey through the city. Earlier this morning, American rappers Snoop Dogg and Pharrell Williams were among the final torchbearers near the Stade de France, north of Paris. For the very latest, we can check in with our reporter, Clovis Casali, who's been following the flame. Clovis, I believe you've made it towards central Paris. Tell us where you are now and what's going on there.
Well, I'm here at the Hôtel de Ville in the heart of the French capital, and take a look at this very long queue. Actually, I'm going to show you the long waiting time for those who have got tickets to the opening ceremony. This queue goes straight to the banks of the Seine, of course, where the opening ceremony is taking place. The people here know they're going to have to wait quite a bit, but they're very excited about taking part in this historic event. And these people come from everywhere. We spoke to Americans, French, Brazilians, and one family came from Sao Paulo, especially for today. And the husband, the father, was telling me he was very happy because it was his daughter's birthday and he managed to clinch a ticket for this event. A French couple was telling me, my wife is such a huge fan of Céline Dion. She just hopes she will get to see her perform tonight during this opening ceremony of the Olympic Games. It's set to be unprecedented. For the first time in modern times, it will be taking place outside a stadium on the Seine, with over 10,000 athletes transported on boats along the Seine, with, of course, special animations. It's a very special show, of course, and the people here are, of course, some of them paid a lot of money for their tickets, but they think it's worthwhile, and they're just hoping that this evening will be what they are hoping for. That is an amazing show with big names. We're talking Céline Dion, possibly a Lady Gaga. For the organisers, of course, security issues. They have a lot of police forces deployed, 45,000 policemen and gendarmes across the Paris region, and 18,000 soldiers.
And Clovis, you've been following the Olympic flame and kind of feeling out the ambiance in Paris throughout the day. Just briefly, what have you been hearing from people, and how would you describe the mood?
Clearly, excitement is building up. Before today, a lot of Parisians, a lot of French people were saying, do we really need these games? It's going to be a lot of money spent by the government. Is it going to be this event we need? And clearly, when you talk to people today, well, the Parisians who've stayed in the capital are excited, do think it's going to be something to remember, of course. And the people I spoke to, whether they're foreigners or Parisians, are all trying to find the best spot to watch the opening ceremony. It might be a home with their families or friends, or in one of the many fan zones across the French capital. But clearly this is the moment that kicks off the Olympic Games Paris 2024, and that's what we were hoping for. That's what we've been waiting for, a moment to maybe forget what's going on in the world and just focus on pleasure and sport.
Well, hopefully everything will go off smoothly. Clovis, thank you so much for that. That's our reporter, Clovis Casali, there reporting from the Hôtel de Ville in central Paris. We'll have to leave it there for this edition, but thanks for watching and stay with us on France 24. We'll have more news coming up soon.
From Marseille in the south of France, one of the host cities of the 2024 Olympics.
It was in Marseille's famed Old Port that the Olympic flame arrived on French soil in May. Marseille-born rap artist Jules lit the Olympic cauldron. Rapper Soprano also took part. And another artist invited was stand-up comedian Redouane Bougaraba.
This This summer, Marseille's marina will welcome Olympic sailing, windsurfing and kitesurfing, while footballers will face off in the city's Velodrome Stadium. With thousands due to descend on this sultry city at the gateway to the French Riviera, it's a chance for Marseille to shine. And one of the city's top cultural selling points is its food.
With 3 Michelin stars, Alexandre Mazière represented Marseille as an Olympic torchbearer. He's also one of 3 top French chefs who'll cook for the athletes in Paris's Olympic Village. A former professional basketball player, Mazière gave me some shooting tips by the beach.
Yeah. Ah, presque. Yes, oh yeah.
I'm a chef who played basketball. I was lucky enough to make it to the national level while still doing my day job.
So what's the link between sport and gastronomy?
There's the energy, the concentration, the practice. What I also like a lot is sharing knowledge and the spirit of fair play, which is part of sport too. It's actually just like the 100 meters in track and field. There's a lot of training for that exceptional 15-second sprint. Above all, though, it's about passion.
After growing up in DR Congo, Alexandre Mazière settled in Marseille and developed a talent for cooking. He opened his avant-garde French restaurant AM in 2014, receiving his 3rd Michelin star in 2021. The chef is known for his inventive dishes, which he's adapting into meals to fuel high-profile athletes. His task is to design a fun, gourmet and healthy menu. Is it a big challenge to cook for Olympic athletes?
It's not just a challenge, it's also a source of pride and encouragement. The challenge is to meet all their needs when it comes to quality and nutrition. It's just like for our customers, we work to give them everything they need.
And you're going to show us a dish you're serving them?
Yes, a signature dish that we're honored to present at the Olympic Village. It's one of the 10 recipes we're serving the athletes. It's a recipe based on chickpeas. They have a lot of fiber, easy to digest. This is made with verbena water. You can see it's quite silky and glossy. Now we're adding a green pea gel for some vegetables, some freshness. This is sugar residue from beetroot. There's no fat, it's just the sugar for a bit of indulgence. Next, a bit of acidity with this citrus.
So you're showing off ingredients from Marseille in the recipe?
We do prioritize ingredients from the Marseille area with the green peas and especially the chickpeas. We also wanted to stay seasonal with products available now. Next, we add some Olympic rings. They're not just there to look pretty, they really bring structure and texture to the dish. This is bougainvillea flour. There you go, a dish that athletes can enjoy during the games.
It's too pretty to eat. The athletes are lucky.
Oui, 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 magnifique. More than a century after women first competed in the Olympics, Paris 2024 will be the first time there is full gender equality. In reality, though, sport remains very male-dominated. During the Games, a photo exhibition called I'm Legit will highlight sportswomen in all their diversity.
One of the largest skate parks in Europe, this is Marseille's Parc du Prado, the perfect setting for a photo shoot.
Clara, tu nous refais le mouvement, on t'enlève, tu remets les lunettes. Catherine, on part sur un bel arbre.
These models feature in the exhibition Je suis légitime or I'm legit. They share the same goal, to create a place for themselves in the world of sport. 15 portraits of sporting women from self-taught local photographer Isis Mesharaf.
They chose their clothes, their hairstyles, whether they wanted to wear makeup. When they asked me for advice, I told them it was important for them to be themselves in the photos and to like their image.
Through this campaign, these athletes encourage young girls by showing them all sports like swimming, sailing and rugby are open to them. It highlights Marseille's sportswomen in all their diversity.
Women need to see themselves represented in sport. When they feel validated, that's when they will take up more space. Our role is to show them they can do it.
I didn't think I could take part in sport because of my disability. I didn't see young girls like me doing it. I saw boys with running blades, but not necessarily girls.
Alex Andriani is a Muay Thai boxing champion. Fighting stereotypes is her mission.
When I was little and until recently, I thought that as a woman, what was expected of me was to be pretty. When I started boxing, I realized that I was strong too, and that I could be even stronger. That's what I wanted to convey through my portrait, strength in a woman's body, because it's possible.
A prominent figure in Marseille's feminist movement, for ISIS, there's still a long way to go.
After this campaign, I'd like to see more women in public spaces, not just represented in ads as objects of beauty to please men, but as subjects in their own right. We need to move beyond the objectification of women and let women reclaim their stories. I want the city walls to tell women's stories and not just show their beauty.
Next to a dancer and choreographer who carried the Olympic torch when it arrived in Marseille back in May. Marina Gomez brought the Olympic flame here to the infamous northern districts. It's here that she works with underprivileged communities using hip-hop dance, trying to bring some positivity to an area said to be one of the poorest in Europe.
Marina, for the Olympics, some of the football will be played in Marseille. What does that mean to people here?
We're happy to welcome this discipline because Marseille is a football town. So if there was one sport we wanted, it was that. We also wanted the breakdancing. It didn't work out that way, so we'll welcome football happily.
So what do you think about the fact that breakdancing will compete as an Olympic sport for the first time?
We're not that sure, because breakdancing is part of wider hip-hop culture. So we're a bit divided, with breakdancing becoming a sport, but not other dance styles. It means we're no longer in the same category. So it's a bit odd. It does give breakdancing more visibility and resources than it's ever had before, so that's good.
Marina, you were a torchbearer when the Olympic flame arrived in France. What did that mean to you?
It's something I wasn't sure about at first, because I wasn't sure it was in line with my values. I had some questions around the social and environmental impact of the Olympics. But the city of Marseille asked me to carry the flame, and that was an honor, a recognition of my work and my commitment. It wasn't so much me as an individual carrying it. So I considered it an honor. It was a source of pride for my family and also for the youth I work with. They were so happy, even happier than me.
And it showed the world Marseille's underprivileged districts in another light when it passed through.
It showed that these neighborhoods can have happy moments, especially because recently there's been so much violence. Symbolically, it was important to be able to walk through these neighborhoods holding that flame.
Your work in Marseille's northern districts is at the heart of everything you do. Tell us more about your mission.
To give the disenfranchised youth their humanity and their childhoods back. Of course, violence exists here, I'm not denying it. In fact, I talk about it through my choreography. But I think it's time that the underprivileged neighborhoods and their youth are given a voice to speak for themselves.
And how do you do that through dance?
I've created a dance trilogy, 3 30-minute episodes that each address different aspects of life in the neighborhood. The first is called Asmenti Midi Minuit. It's a day in the life here from noon to midnight, or from childhood to adulthood. The second is Bac Nord, Sortez les guitares. It's a piece created with the local youth who perform with us on stage. The third piece is called La Cuenta Medellín Marseille. It's about gang war from the female perspective, the mothers and sisters for whom our neighborhood's dead are not just numbers.
And you've worked as a youth psychologist here?
Yes.
How does that influence your work?
Maybe what I've learned from psychology is really to let people speak for themselves and not to speak for them. I was a psychologist in the education system. Through that work, I learned to use dance as a tool for empowerment and self-appreciation, to improve young people's self-esteem.
That brings us to the end of this special Olympic culture show from Marseille. We'll leave you with a look inside the city's famous Musée Museum, an exhibition called Achievements and Masterpieces Exploring the Link Between Sport and Art is on here until September. Thanks for watching. See you next time.
Special event.
From July 26th to August 11th, tune in to France 24 to follow the Paris Games. Our teams on the ground will be reporting in 4 languages. Follow all the action, the results and the medals. Watch the interviews, the events behind the scenes, the reactions. During 2 weeks, France 24 will be meeting supporters from around the world to hear their stories, hopes and dreams. Paris Games. From July 26th to August 11th on France 24 and France24.com.
I'm Matt Hunt, France 24 correspondent based in Bangkok. Follow me here for breaking news and stories from Southeast Asia on France 24.
Matt Hunt, one of the 200 France 24 correspondents around the world.
Hello and welcome back to the France 24 newsroom here in Paris. Our headlines this hour. Traffic slowly resumes after a massive attack targeting France's rail network. It came just hours ahead of the Olympics opening ceremony, with cancellations and delays impacting 800,000 travelers, including some Olympic athletes. Paris Mayor Anne Hidalgo says the sabotage will not impact tonight's ceremony. Speculation continues over the final performance lineup, and despite the rain, festivities are already underway as the Olympic flame makes its final journey through the city. We'll check in for the latest from our reporter, Clovis Casali. And the Olympics are a diplomatic event as well, with French President Emmanuel Macron hosting more than 100 heads of state. Major absences include Russian President Vladimir Putin, left off the guest list due to the war in Ukraine. We'll have more from our international affairs commentator, Douglas Herbert. Thank you for joining us. And we begin with that coordinated sabotage of France's national rail network just hours ahead of the Olympics opening ceremony here in Paris. The SNCF targeted by what they've called a massive attack with overnight vandalism, including arson, targeting cable boxes and signaling systems. The seemingly coordinated attacks hit major axes to the north, east, and southwest of Paris. Prosecutors have opened a national investigation, and France's interior minister said they hope to make arrests quickly. Some 800,000 travelers have been impacted, including some Olympic athletes. British Prime Minister Keir Starmer also among those who had to change travel plans. He took a plane after a quarter of Eurostar trains were cancelled. Well, let's hear now from some stranded passengers at the Gare Montparnasse here in southern Paris.
It's a criminal act. It's the opening ceremony of the Olympics today. All the French traveling today are affected, and many tourists too. The world's eyes are on Paris right now. It's unacceptable.
We've been trying to find ways to arrive at our destination. There are some ferries available until 6:30 p.m., so we're exploring different options.
On the application, it says our train is 2 hours late, so we're hoping it'll stay that way. If it doesn't, we'll have to take a car and drive to Spain or something. But for now, we can just keep our fingers crossed and wait.
Traffic has slowly been resuming this afternoon. France 24's Sophie Lamotte has been following the situation at the Gare Montparnasse. She sent us this update a short while ago.
Announcements of trains being delayed and trains being cancelled are still resonating through the halls of the Montparnasse station right behind me. The western part of France is the most impacted. Only a fraction of trains are actually departing at their station. We spoke to the head of the Atlantic Railway, that western part of France, who said how sorry he was that the SNCF, the French railway, were not up to the task on this very important departure weekend ahead of the Olympics, as well as in the middle of the summer holidays. He said that 4 Olympic trains were impacted by this breach, and also 800,000 people were impacted throughout France. We spoke to some of them, some families who had been saving up for these holidays, who said they're the only holidays that they were going to take this year. And we also spoke to some tourists who were coming from Rotterdam, who said they were lucky enough to even have made it to Paris this morning, and they're now stranded in the Montparnasse station because they're not able to take their second train. They said they're afraid that they might have to stay overnight in Paris in some of these overpriced hotels. And there's overall a sense of outrage as people are saying, how could this have happened? Security has been on the top of the agenda for the past few months, and although they're reassured by the strong police presence here in Paris, they're wondering how this security threat might evolve over the next few weeks, where 15 million people are expected in the capital for the Olympics.
Sophie Lamotte reporting there. Well, meanwhile, an airport near the French-Swiss border was temporarily evacuated earlier this Friday due to a bomb threat. Euro Airport is located on the French side of the border near Basel. It has since reopened and gradually resumed its flights. The bomb scare came just hours after those attacks on the French rail network, feeding into a sense of apprehension ahead of tonight's opening ceremony. Well, the Games are a diplomatic event as well, with French President Emmanuel Macron welcoming more than 100 heads of state. Guests include Argentina's President Javier Milei, Britain's new Labour Prime Minister Keir Starmer, and U.S. First Lady Jill Biden. The Israeli President Isaac Herzog will be attending under tight security, as will the head of the Palestinian Olympic Committee, representing Palestinian Authority leader Mahmoud Abbas. Ukrainian President Vladimir Zelensky has not confirmed whether he will attend, while Russian President Vladimir Putin is not invited due to the war in Ukraine. Well, for more, we can bring in our international affairs commentator, Douglas Herbert. Doug, Vladimir Putin, the big absentee here.
Yeah, all the royalty, world leaders, big lineup, right? Over 100 heads of state and government are going to be there, sitting around Macron near the Trocadero in a couple of hours' time. Look, Putin is not there for a very clear reason. Clear because the International Organizing Committee, the Olympic Organizing Committee, made it clear. He was banned because of his invasion of Ukraine in February 2022. Now, remember, up until that, we also had Russians banned for allegedly behaving badly. In that case, doping scandals. That was the big reason Russians were banned up until the invasion of Ukraine. But that hadn't stopped them, say, the Tokyo Olympics from sending a very large Russian delegation. Russia's always been a powerhouse in the Olympics. They sent some 335 athletes to Tokyo, height of COVID, but they were a very big presence there. This time, you can guess how many Russians will be there. 15. And even fewer Belarusians. Belarus, obviously the neighboring vassal state to Russia. Its leader, Alexander Lukashenko, basically, marching hand in hand with Vladimir Putin on the Ukraine issue, abetting him, helping him in every way. So they're not going to be there. But what's interesting about this is the Russians who are there, as with the doping scandals, the 15 I said will be there. They've chosen to participate. They were vetted twice. That is, they cannot overtly support the war in Ukraine. They cannot have any ties to the Russian military or to Russian security intelligence agencies. And they also have to take a pledge, like I said, that they are against the war in Ukraine. There will be no hymn. There'll be no Russian national anthem played if they get medals. There will be no Russian flag. They will be under the banner of independent neutral athlete. That's a designation we have seen in the past at these Olympics. Russians see it as a slap in the face. They want nothing to do. Most Russians want nothing to do with these Olympics. The country has been fed the narrative that the West is basically out to get Russia. The West is out to humiliate Russia. This is part of Vladimir Putin's long, big narrative. This is an existential struggle of Russia against the West. This is part of the West humiliation game. Like, the West has nothing better to do than look for ways to humiliate Russia. That's the narrative in Russia. A lot of Russians, for better or for worse, because they don't have a lot of alternative access to information, they buy into that narrative. And they are actually angry, some of them, not all, but some, at the athletes who chose to participate, the 15 who chose. Now, it's true that some of those athletes who passed the vetting, who were greenlit by the Olympic Committee, and they said, you can come, they chose not to come, either in solidarity with their fellow athletes, Russian athletes, who couldn't come, or because their particular sporting federations in Russia decided not to go. So there are various reasons that the Russians who didn't go, the ones who were accepted. But in general, if you want to watch these games in Russia, you won't be able to do so because it's not being broadcast anywhere. I was looking through some of the Russian media earlier today, including the main state press agency. The only headline about the Olympics, the only one on their entire, I scrolled way down the page, was about the train, the vandalism attacks on the French high-speed rail network, the TGV network, which are being called malicious acts, including arson attacks. That's all they mention. So when you hear about the Olympics in Russia, you can almost guarantee in the state-run media, it is going to be something that concentrates on the negative. If something negative or bad happens, you will hear about that in Russia. Otherwise, they are giving this a snub. Most Russians are, again, and I'll just leave you with this thought, the head of the Russian Sporting Olympic Committee actually maligned some of the athletes who are participating, saying that they are foreign agents. That's a designation Putin has given to anyone sort of basically who collaborates with outsiders or is seen as getting help from the outside. Foreign agent has become the new designation, public enemy #1.
Wow. Yeah, big global issues hanging over these games. Yeah. Doug, thank you so much for that. That's our international affairs commentator there, Douglas Herbert. Well, Paris Mayor Anne Hidalgo has said that the railway sabotage would have no impact on the opening ceremony. Forecast rain could put a damper on things, though. Visitors so far don't seem too put off. Jenny Shin has more on the final preparations underway along the Seine.
Are we going to be famous?
This couple from the Czech Republic is on a morning stroll along the Seine to get a glimpse of the venue of the opening ceremony.
We just wanted to check how it looks and to prepare for the evening, but anyway, we don't know. So that's it, what we know actually. So
You are so mysterious.
yeah.
With just hours to go until the event, the grey weather was far from ideal on Friday morning. But it's not enough to dampen spirits. Many remain optimistic.
It's not going to rain. It'll be beautiful.
We think it's going to be an amazing show. It's a shame it's raining, but I think it's going to make it more romantic.
Organisers of the ceremony have been discussing a plan B. Heavy rain means certain details of the show could be modified. But at Pont de l'Alma, where the catering service is preparing full steam ahead, there will be no changes to the plan. They've been preparing the menu for months, handpicked by the chef.
We have to feed 1,500 people come 6 p.m. There's no room for mistakes. Everything is meticulously planned and structured.
As preparations near an end, the countdown for 7:30 p.m. Paris time continues, as France and the world wait to tune in for the start of the Paris 2024 Olympic Games.
Well, despite the less than ideal weather, festivities have already begun here in Paris. The Olympic flame has been making its final journey through the city. Earlier this morning, American rappers Snoop Dogg and Pharrell Williams were among the final torchbearers near the Stade de France, north of Paris. For the very latest, we can check in with our reporter, Clovis Casali, who's been following the flame. Clovis, I believe you've made it towards central Paris. Tell us where you are now and what's going on there.
Well, I'm here at the Hôtel de Ville in the heart of the French capital, and take a look at this very long queue. Actually, I'm going to show you the long waiting time for those who have got tickets to the opening ceremony. This queue goes straight to the banks of the Seine, of course, where the opening ceremony is taking place. The people here know they're going to have to wait quite a bit, but they're very excited about taking part in this historic event. And these people come from everywhere. We spoke to Americans, French, Brazilians, and one family came from Sao Paulo, especially for today. And the husband, the father, was telling me he was very happy because it was his daughter's birthday and he managed to clinch a ticket for this event. A French couple was telling me, my wife is such a huge fan of Céline Dion. She just hopes she will get to see her perform tonight during this opening ceremony of the Olympic Games. It's set to be unprecedented. For the first time in modern times, it will be taking place outside a stadium on the Seine, with over 10,000 athletes transported on boats along the Seine, with, of course, special and